This is the big one. Today we're talking about William Faulkner, and specifically The Sound and the Fury. This is a book that many people are introduced to very young in high school. It's a super complex book. For some, like me, it's led me to a lifetime of loving to read and wanting to write and create literature that's as transcendent as what Faulkner has done. But for many people, it put them off reading entirely, and it made them feel stupid in high school, and that they never wanted to read again because they didn't want to feel dumb again. This is a super complex book, but it has some wonderful, deep, tragic things in it. You know, Faulkner, it came from the American South, and the American South that his father, grandfather, great-grandfather were a part of were the slave-holding South. And they were the kind of the offspring of the Civil War, in which their way of life was destroyed. And their pretense that slavery was part of God's plan and was an ethical, moral thing, where really all those guys were just going around and having sex with all their slaves, which is what underlying a lot of this. So when that kind of hypocritical structure is taken out from under them, society can decay. And with throughout Faulkner's work, the underpinning of it is a society that is paying the price for the hypocrisy and the evil that has been done. And beyond that, I think, it looks into the evil that all of us do through our the things that we do, our relationships with others. I specifically wanted to show, this is a Folio edition of The Sound and the Fury. What's special about this? Now, Sound and the Fury is split up into 4 big parts. One detailing the thoughts of a certain character. And the first part is Benji, this retarded guy who can't really make sense of what's happening, and thus the narrative cuts back and forth between different times, different thoughts that this person has. And as a reader, if you're the young reader and you're first reading this, you're like, oh my gosh, what is this? And it is quite a complex way to tell a story, to tell such a simple story about, these people in the South, this family, this landed family that is decaying and falling apart. But if you're familiar with this, you'll know how it just cuts back and forth from one paragraph sometime to another. So it just becomes nonsensical. And with the time, this was seen as a very modernist way of doing literature. But originally, Faulkner had intended to print each section of this prose in a different color. So each color would indicate a different time period. And then it's scattered back and forth between it. So finally, in this edition, the Folio edition, they made that come to life. So I'm not sure if it shows up, but some of the text is green, some of it is red. You see, here's some red parts, and if you're reading this, it's kind of funny and nonsensical, but each color is popping back and forth between a different time period from the recollections of this character Benji, who is the retarded guy who's living there. And the book also comes with, see, this is just in that first part where all the different time periods color-coded that go back and forth that show you what time period is. Now, in a way, it's not really relevant to know that. I remember in high school, my teacher was Miss Shirley Leister, kind of a well-known teacher in my part of the world. We were given out this little handout that showed, was written down, how these sections popped back and forth, and I studied it and everything. But ultimately, this is a modernist fiction tale. Was well before its ahead of its time. When it first came out, it just had a small printing. I don't know, for a few thousand or 1,500 copies. It sold some. It was reviewed. It kind of disappeared. After World War II, the printing company put out this. They wanted to rejuvenate some of the moribund authors and books they had, of which Faulkner's books were, and they put out a thing called the Portable Faulkner. They put a whole series of these. This is a way to like rejuvenate some interest. And in the post-World War II period, suddenly people were ready to read this very complex modernist style of writing where they hadn't in the 20s or the 30s. Another interesting thing is, in the time, writers like Faulkner, Carson McCullers, even later on Flannery O'Connor, all people I love and you've heard me talk about, they were all considered Gothic, kind of Gothic, Southern Gothic, which is lurid tales of outsiders, almost like a pulp fiction, pulp stories, super sensational. It was only in later decades that these started to be seen as some great literature that had great truths in them, and that by looking at the story of weirdos, often they're retarded people, disabled people, homosexuals, or just people who don't fit in, people who are pushed outside of society in this time and place, and I suppose now as well, that in a later period we could identify with the human condition that all people had, and love and identify and sympathize with all kinds of different people. So this is something that influenced me a lot. The other books of the time, in Stephen King's On Writing, of all people, he describes very accurately how any author who's like a great author, and Stephen King says so. I think he acknowledges he's not a great author. He's a vernacular author, writes a lot of stuff very consistently. But the really greats, like the Faulkners or even more Carson McCullers, they have a certain time period. Even though they might write for decades, they have a certain time period where there's 3 or 4 that are great, and the others are just okay. And an author just hits that time period, and during this time and around this time, we have The Sound and the Fury, and we have As I Lay Dying, and we have A Light in August, which is sort of an unsung one. It's the only Faulkner book that doesn't entail tightly around a family. It's people who are not in a family, and all that Faulkner style applied. I'll have to talk about that one. But this is somebody who is a great influence to me, and I have read all of the books and all of the forms from him, and I have all of them on audiobook as well. It's just an unusual author to listen to in audio form. It's very long run-on sentences. You'll know if you read my books. Sometimes I have long sentences as well. So this is what we call sacrilege. Here within the same sentences as Faulkner and Carson McCullers. I'm going to bring up my own book. This is my latest novel, There Are Still Unknown Places. It's about people going off to the far places of the world to find themselves, and it's about the disillusionment with the modern world and its promises. And I hope you'll buy it. It's on Amazon Kindle, and it's on sale in Thailand at Amazon Books and at Books Kino. And anyway, if you read it, let me know what you think. Thanks for listening.